Good morning, Carter. How are you doing?
Hey, Allie, doing great.
Good. Good to hear. And welcome to everyone who's jumping on the call this morning. We're excited to have you here. It is finally chilly in Northwest Arkansas, so I'm wearing my sweater and my jacket and all my fun fall things. I'm very excited for that. Carter, how do you feel about this chilly weather? Good or bad?
Uh, it's a little more chilly than I would have liked this morning, but I have enjoyed the last few weeks of not 100-degree weather and finally getting some good weather. And also had an excuse to pull my new SuppyPike sweater out, so I
Hey,
like
I
it.
love it. Peep the logo on the side. It looks great. Nice. Well, as people start to roll in this morning, we'll kind of start with our fun question, which is something we like to do here before we start talking about all the riveting things that come with shipping documents and purchase orders and disputing with those documentation. We'll get into a fun question. And before we started, Carter, I asked you if you liked Halloween or Christmas better, because that will determine the question. And while you answer, well, we can also have people in the chat answer as well. So, Christmas, what is the best gift you've received during Christmas or the holiday season?
Hmm, that's a good one. Let me think back. You know, Probably showing my age here a little bit, but I don't think I will always remember, like 7 or 8 years old, running to under the Christmas tree and unwrapping the Nintendo 64 back in the day. So I think that was my best one and best memory.
Yeah, how could you not? That is the iconic Christmas present. I feel like still today you can see the videos on YouTube of kids unwrapping those because it was like the biggest deal.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a
Yeah.
great one, the Nintendo 64.
There's
Yeah,
lots of Mario played that year.
of course you have to. That's like the game to play on the Nintendo 64. It's a great gift. I wonder if people have said anything in the chat what their favorite is. We haven't had anything in the chat yet for favorite Christmas gift you've gotten, but I'll go ahead and share mine. I mine's also my Nintendo, but my DS. I got the DS, so that's the dual screen. You could play. My siblings also got one, so we could play like the multiplayer Mario games. That's another good Christmas. So I'm glad you said Nintendo because Nintendo is just like the perfect Christmas gift. Maybe now kids get like a Switch. I think that's what people play.
Mm-hmm.
That would be on my Christmas list for sure. No, nobody has any great gifts that they remember from Christmas or holiday season. Like it doesn't even have to be Christmas. I'm just the cold weather came and I was like, I'm ready for the holiday season. So if nobody has anything to add, then we'll just go ahead and get started. Hi everyone. My name is Ali Trong. I'm the content coordinator here. And then we have the wonderful Carter King. And Carter, you've been with SuppyPike for how long now?
It'll be 4 years in a couple weeks.
Wow, that's awesome. Pretty close to the beginning of SuppyPike. That's correct?
Yeah, I think the day that I started was like the week that they officially broke off and became their own company. So yeah.
Wow, that's so exciting. Well, happy early work anniversary. And really excited that you're joining us today to talk about shipping documents. I feel like this can be some of the most painful part of the process when it comes to whether just the day-to-day process or when it comes to disputing and the documentation. I love this graphic that one of our designers made because it's just all these like papers flying out, and that's what I envision. It's just can be a little bit messy and cluttery and like a hunt to try to find all the shipping documents. So I'm really excited to hear from your expertise today. And with that, we'll kind of get into the slides. Again, these are our names and faces and our roles. And you own our Document Explorer product. Do you want to talk to us a little bit about that at all?
Yeah, for sure. So yeah, I lead the Document Explorer team here at SuppyPike. It's one of our newer applications and it is, kind of focused on solving that problem around finding shipping documents. So
Mm.
both, well, I guess kind of two sides, locating the shipping documents themselves, and then organizing them so that they're kind of all perfectly formatted and ready to be used to dispute shipping related deductions with retailers. And then obviously the storage as well, because that's, part of it for sure is a lot of times the carriers or different document repository type services will archive those after a while. So as I think most of us are familiar or know, those retailer deductions can be really untimely. And then things like post audits can happen 2+ years after specific shipment. So getting everything downloaded, organized, and then stored indefinitely, really important. And that's the problem we're trying to solve with Document Explorer.
Very cool. And I'm really excited to get into that, which is a perfect segue to kind of what we're going to be doing during this hour on this Tuesday morning. So we're going to talk about Shipping Documents 101. So we're going to give kind of the basics of what shipping documents are, kind of talk through that. We'll have a conversation, Carter and I, and then we'll open the rest of the hour up to questions. So we've got some prepared, but please put your questions in now so we can start to answer those during the hour. During these office hours, we usually have lots of questions. So going to the next slide, the best way to ask questions during these office hours is to put them in the Q&A chat. So the chat where it has the one speech bubble, that's perfect for attendees to put comments or kind of continue the conversation that Carter and I are having here on the webinar this morning. But then for questions, the best way for me to see those questions is actually to put them in the Q&A tab, which is two speech bubbles on top of each other. And then in terms of taking notes or screenshotting, you're welcome to do any of those things, but we do send out a recording of today's webinar as well as a copy of the slide deck. So you can sit back and relax and enjoy the conversation and think up some great shipping document questions for today's conversation. Then lastly, before we get into today's content, I'm going to talk a little bit about who we are at SupplyPike. So if you're new to these webinars, we're SupplyPike. We create cloud-based tools that maximize cash flow and minimize revenue loss. And we do that in a couple different ways. And we can talk through our products, but today we're here for learning under the Supplier Wiki branch. So SupplyPike essentially has two branches. It's our product, and then we have our educational platform, and that's what you're on today. So Supplier Wiki creates free webinars that are relevant for suppliers. We create lots of different resources such as articles and ebooks. So go ahead, if you haven't checked out our page, look at that, and we will have some great in-person events coming up soon as well. And with that, we'll go ahead and jump into Shipping Documents 101. So all retailers are different, but from what we've seen, generally across the board, you're going to have standard shipping documents, whether you are working with retailers, 3PLs, and carriers. We're going to get into what some of those shipping documents look like at a high level. So shipping documents are used as legal agreements. They are like a binding document that between a supplier and a retailer. They're a receipt for the details of the service. They're the title of goods. So that means essentially if a supplier says, all right, I want to ship collect, here you go, Walmart Freight, you're in charge of these goods, my inventory, as you're acting as myself, the supplier, to get these to the destination they need to go to. And then also kind of what we focus on here at SupplyPike is proof documentation for disputing. And one thing I want to call out here, and Carter, maybe you have something to add here as well, is depending on the retailer, depending on who you're working with, different shipping documents have different mileage, meaning that, you know, a POD at Walmart may not be sufficient documentation for disputing at Amazon or Kroger or with KE and Unify. Carter, what's your experience there?
Yeah, that's exactly right, Allie. There's a lot of nuance that goes into each retailer. And we have specific teams here at SupplyPike that go really, really deep and have a lot of expertise into, shipping programs at Walmart versus Target as an example. But, like you mentioned on the last slide, generally you're using shipping documents in the forms of BOLs and PODs. And those also can kind of come in different shapes and sizes, but generally they are, same type of information on them and fundamentally the same thing.
Sweet. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. And we'll kind of get into what some of those examples look like for what you mentioned, Carter, the BOLs, PODs, and you can kind of give us a high level overview of how they might be different in different retailers or working with different carriers or so forth. Kind of alluded to this. So these are some of the common ones that we're talking about. Bill of lading, or your BOLs, your proof of delivery, your PODs. Purchase orders are not technically going to be a shipping document, but it is kind of back to that root of what is being shipped and can create issues if they're not properly processed or if they're canceled, etc. Lots of things can happen with purchase orders that can create pathways for having to dispute something, as well as packing slips, pick lists, packing tickets, etc. So here's an example of a BOL. It's going to include some of the important information like ship to address, the purchase order number, basic information. So, number of cases, weight, it's going to be important to the shipping process. Carrier signature showing up that things are picked up in full. And Carter, speaking to this part, how important is that carrier signature or some of those other details on the BOL?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the most important part, right? That's, that signature is designating that a third party, in this case, the driver, has verified that what is on this document was actually loaded into the truck. So yeah, that's for sure a really important part. If you don't have a signature, there really has been no verification. And if you're trying to use these to dispute chargebacks, it's really, probably not going to constitute as proof. You're probably going to get denied, or there's a chance you'll get denied and say, looks like no one verified that what this document states was actually correct. I would say in addition to that, obviously, what the document states as far as items and item quantities are super important when you're trying to prove something one way or the other. So definitely want to make sure that, what's on the document matches up to your expectations of what you thought shipped. And then again, going back to deductions, if it matches up to the invoice and what was actually paid on that invoice. One other thing, and I imagine we may get a question around this as well, also towards the bottom of that document, right next or in between the two signatures, is some check boxes that you'll notice. So those are really important as well. Generally denotes, again, how it was verified and if it was verified. So yeah, those are important to pay attention to as well.
Perfect. And I'm gonna hold back my questions I have here because I'll let some of our attendees ask questions, but I've got some great questions that I'm thinking about just from our conversation here. All right, and then we'll move on to an example POD. So this is generally a section on the BOL that is filled out and signed when loaded, and it designates if the purchase order was received in full or if quantity was over, short, and damaged. And this is usually filled out by the truck driver or when received, correct, Carter?
It would be filled out, yeah, at the actual DC, wherever the end location is. So this is who is actually receiving the items. And yeah, that's exactly right as far as that O, S, and D, over, short, and damage section. So that is where, if there are values there, it's basically saying, what is supposed to be on the shipment was not actually on the shipment, and whether that's over, short, or damaged. I would say also on here, kind of BOLs are generally pretty standard format. PODs really can vary as far as what they look like, but this is a really common one, and we've seen it seem to be more common, this OS and D type stamp or section on the BOL.
Mm. Yeah, what's interesting to me about PODs is kind of watching some retailers move away from them. So Amazon does not require PODs for disputing because of the way that they ship, but for big box retailers like Walmart, Target, these are still pretty relevant, correct?
Particularly for prepaid shipments. Yeah. The
Mhm.
POD is what really, so I guess if we back up a little bit and if we touch on collect versus prepaid real quick, collect, you're not going to have the POD generally because you don't have that relationship with the carrier that's actually picking it up.
Mhm.
BOL gets signed when the goods are actually loaded into the truck. And that's kind of where, where as a collect supplier, your job ends, right? That's where the goods are transferred. As soon as they're loaded into Walmart's truck for a collect shipment, that's when they take ownership. So you're likely not ever going to get a POD because that, your relationship with the driver kind of ended at when he left your dock. On the flip side, for prepaid, you do own that relationship as a supplier. You are the one that is managing the shipment with, we'll say, JB Hunt as an example. So you would have access to that POD from the carrier after it is delivered. And there can be some caveats to this, but generally, the carrier is required to give a POD to be able to collect payment for that shipment.
Perfect. I definitely want to get into some of the details when it comes to documents when shipping collect versus prepaid, but I'll say this to the end. I'm seeing some questions populate in the Q&A chat, so we'll keep moving right along so we can get to all of those that we've got coming in this morning. Thanks for that helpful caveat, Carter. And then here we have, continuing on the example of the POD, gate drop trailer stamp. So this is going to be a sticker placed on the BOL by the retailer and signed by the driver. It proves that the shipment arrived at the retailer's DC, but it does not prove quantity received. And the burden of proof is on the retailer if the dispute is denied. Any thoughts here that you wanted to say, Carter?
Yeah, so this generally happens in the scenario where a trailer is not unloaded as soon as it arrives to a DC. So we saw this really common over the last few years with DCs being really backed up and being kind of a bottleneck for actually receiving these shipments. What's really common is they'll just have, they'll have the driver just drop their trailer in the yard, and then the driver leaves and it gets unloaded, when Walmart or whichever retailer has capacity to do so. So yeah, that's when you would get that. And then on that burden of proof, last bullet point there again, that's kind of a general statement and true for the most part. But again, there are going to be some kind of nuances to that from retailer to retailer.
And I'm sure we saw a lot of this creating issue during COVID with just the max capacity at DCs. So I'm interested if people want to put in the chat kind of their experience of this, especially during COVID, because I know that this was a major issue just across the board.
Yeah.
Moving on, packing slips are going to be an internal document outlining what should be included in the shipment. It essentially tells the warehouse what they need to pick and where they can find it. And it's not required, but could you speak, Carter, to why it's relevant for deductions?
Yeah, so I mean, it basically it is exactly what you said. It's something that is specific to a supplier. It's not a retailer document. The driver is never actually going to get it. But it's kind of just some supporting evidence that, this is what we picked and staged to be placed on the truck. And again, if you can just tell a consistent story where the purchase order says 100 cases, the packing slip says 100 cases, the BOL says 100 cases, just having that consistency across all of these different document types is generally going to help your case if you're trying to prove potential invalid deduction.
Help your case. I like what you did there. Case pack. We love puns here. And I wanted to say something to that too. I think it also helps with Walmart's new-ish compliance program, SQEP. So one of the first phases they rolled out was PO accuracy, barcode and labeling, being able to tell a consistent story across, what do your labels say, what your vendor pack versus master pack versus SKUs say, having that all say the same story in a really consistent way is one of the easiest way to avoid fines, whether it be a shortage fine. But we're seeing a lot of suppliers deal with SQEP fines in phase one cropping up, or in phase two and three, for these reasons, just not telling a consistent story across the board, or making it easier for the retailer to understand that you're telling a consistent story. So I'm saying two different things there, but essentially just making it super easy for the retailer to understand that you are in fact doing what you are accountable for.
Yeah, for sure. And just to kind of tack on to that, like, it's not required, and generally a retailer is not going to care if you have a packing slip or not. But, I think it just indicates that you have processes in place that are meant to ensure accuracy. So yeah, I think it's just a good kind of process type thing to have in place.
For sure, I agree. And then lastly, talking about purchase orders. So again, this is not necessarily what is going to be considered a document for shipping related purchases, but it is something that executes and kind of drives some of the details that are on bill of lading, are on your proof of delivery, packing slips. It can drive what's on your ASNs or your invoices. So starting at the very beginning, kind of the point we were talking about earlier, just on the last slide, Carter, how the details here tend to start driving the story we're telling from end to end, when the product is set up in item 360, all the way to when it gets to the retailer, and it's always going to be the right quantity, right amount, packaged perfectly. Anything you wanted to speak to when it comes to setting up, creating, editing purchase orders?
No, I think, just back to that same point as far as consistency. Purchase order is going to be, the first thing in kind of that whole flow of products getting to a retailer. So making sure that, what's on the POs, what's on the packing list is what's on the BOL and the POD, and ultimately the invoice as well. So yeah, it's the first document in the flow. So if you do need to make a change, ideally you can catch it up front. You can adjust the purchase order if you need to, ship a lesser amount, or change items, or whatever it may be. If possible, getting in front of it and making that adjustment to the purchase order is going to be ideal.
Yes, 100%. And we do have a free webinar on navigating Nova, which is Walmart's purchase order management system. So go and check those out on Supplier Wiki if this is something you have more questions on. Perfect. Well, we are to the Q&A section. Carter, I'm going to start with an easier one, not put you on the hot seat just yet. But can you speak to the different documents relevant to collect versus prepaid shipments? I know you kind of covered that a little bit, but especially when it comes to disputing, no matter what lane you're in.
Yeah. So at a high level, the BOL is going to be the most pertinent thing for a collect supplier. And again, that's just it is a legally binding document that states that the goods were transferred to another party after the truck was loaded and the BOL was signed. So yeah, BOL, bill of lading, for collect shipments. And then for prepaid, you're going to have a BOL as well. But particularly in the case of disputing chargebacks, what's really going to be the most relevant is the proof of delivery, since that is when the goods are actually transferred for prepaid. It happens when the truck is unloaded at the final destination.
Perfect. That's helpful to kind of sort those two out.
Yeah, and then just, I guess, to clarify, all of the other documents that we've mentioned, so POs, ASNs, invoices, those are all going to be relevant to all types of shipping. Really, the I guess, just to summarize, POD is going to be the only one that is, only relevant to a prepaid shipment.
Yeah, and I have seen some suppliers really struggle to get their hands on their POD, which is something you can request, but when you're sending an email to someone who has 500, 600 emails in their inbox about so many things, sometimes that kind of gets lost. But from your knowledge, do you know if suppliers are able to dispute without those PODs?
Yeah, you can, and again, I think it may vary across retailers. Just using Walmart as an example, it's not required to submit a dispute, um, and we do see a lot of times that shipping related deductions will get approved without any kind of proof documentation,
Mhm.
and that generally happens, if it was goods were received later after the invoice, and then kind of after the fact they can reference their own data and see that a PO was received in full after the fact.
Mm.
So
Okay,
yeah,
perfect.
not
That's super.
required, but definitely if there's any uncertainty on the retailer's part, they're gonna deny it unless there's a POD that clearly proves otherwise.
I gotcha. That's helpful. Um, and kind of speaking to that, what are some of the barriers or roadblocks you see for suppliers when it comes to um, using shipping documents, accessing them, and disputing with them?
Yeah, I mean, so accessing, I think, is the big one, right?
Mhm.
And the problems that suppliers face are really going to kind of depend on how they're shipping, and probably the volume that they're shipping, and maybe also as well, like if they're shipping with multiple carriers.
Mhm.
So yeah, it really just kind of depends. But I would say the biggest problem is actually accessing the document. So
Mhm.
some carriers are certainly much better about making those documents available in like an online portal, which is key. I would say, if you are shopping around for different carriers, I would say that's table stakes, is them having some sort of online web portal where you can log in and access those documents. It's for sure, even the best carriers are, they're not going to have 100% of the PODs. So you mentioned kind of workarounds for that is probably just emailing your carrier rep with specific requests as far as, hey, I need a document for this PO number, and any kind of additional information you can give them, if there's a BOL number or a pro number, as much data as you can. But yeah, I would say the more data you have about the documents, and the more proactive you are about getting those documents and organizing them well, is going to be key. Because I guess the other thing, as far as maybe it was available at one time in this portal, but it has since been archived, and that goes back to things like post audits that are 2 years later. By the time you need the document, it's been archived and is no longer available. So
Mhm.
um, I know, some couple specific ones. FedEx and UPS are particularly notorious for archiving them relatively quickly. I think they're at 90 and 120 days
Wow.
respectively. So yeah.
That's so interesting with, post audits for Walmart. Um, Dispute timelines for most retailers is longer than that. I know like Kroger's is 180 days or something like that, and Walmart's is like up to 2 years. Target's in there somewhere in the middle there, but that's so interesting that pretty standard, like widely used carriers archive those pretty early on. It's
Yeah,
interesting.
I mean, kind of perfect storm, and we see this all the time with some of our customers. Is you may have some really long payment terms, so like net 90 days after the shipment is when you're actually invoicing, and then so you're not going to get a deduction until you invoice, and it's probably going to be
Mhm.
a few days after that. So you're already past the 90 days on day one of getting that chargeback. So if you're shipping with UPS and you have those really long payment terms, really key to be proactive about pulling and storing those PODs up front.
Yeah, definitely. That's a great tip. And then kind of to zoom out, I want to get to this question that's popped up. Would you say that the conversation we're having today is applicable to obviously Walmart US, but Walmart Canada as well? And do you know of any differences that are in regards to the shipping documents needed?
I would say at a high level, just looking at shipping documents, there's probably not going to be any real differences.
Mhm.
There certainly are some nuances as far as like their compliance program. I know OTIF with Walmart Canada is slightly different than the ones with um, Walmart US. But as far as just that, they also do collect and prepaid. Um, Generally, you're expected to have the BOL for collect shipments.
Mhm.
Generally, you're expected to have the POD for prepaid shipments. So fundamentally the same, but definitely some nuances there.
Yes, and to that point, we have had a lot of buzz about Canada, you Walmart Canada in our webinars. Our team is working on that right now, so we're going to include some of this information too, just to cross-reference to see if there are differences and similarities across Walmart Canada and Walmart US. But for the most part, there's pretty little differences from what I've seen. So I appreciate you highlighting, that at a high level, it's relatively
Yeah,
the same
yeah,
besides the
for sure. I,
compliance.
I know there, it seems like it's been a little bit more of a hot topic in the last few months with Canada. I know we've gotten a lot of questions, and I know our Deductions Navigator Walmart team has really been kind of doing the deep dive into potential differences with Canada. So yeah, I'm sure you guys are working on some content around those differences and excited to see that.
Yes, we are. And that's just a call out to everyone on the call as well. If you do have certain knowledge gaps or things you want researched, if you poke our team enough, we're gonna look at it. We were on a call the other day, and like 5 or 6 different attendees were like Walmart Canada. So we put it on our list. It's getting worked on. We just finished with our conference that we did last week, so it is next on the chopping block to get done. Back to some questions. Let's talk a little bit about storage. So you kind of talked about having to download those and being able to access them past the time that they're archived. Do you have any best practices in terms of storing those documents? Because I mean, I don't know what the storage looks like on your computer, but mine's already at capacity, probably. I feel like my computer's running a little bit slower. So what's the best way to store shipping documents if you're just doing it kind of manually or downloading things?
Yeah. Well, so I think, best case, and I'll touch on some best practices and things. I think obviously I'm a little biased, but automation is really going to be key here. That it's just not realistic for you to, be able to download all of these documents and put the PO number and the invoice number and the file name and things like that. So using something like a SuppyPike Document Explorer or some kind of automation where you're leveraging technology to organize and make searchable just like a big stack of documents. I would say at a minimum, you need to be digitizing these documents. So if your teams have implemented the eBOL or electronic BOL, I would say like hats off to you. That is for sure the way of the future. It is very slow adoption though. So I would say by far the majority of collect shippers are still printing off an actual PDF paper for the BOL and getting that signed. Some of them I think are probably just throwing them away or throwing them in a corner or putting them in a file cabinet somewhere. And really that just doesn't do you much good because you may get a $20,000 deduction and then you have to sort through this stack of papers from the past 6 months to find the one that you need. So I would say at the minimum, you should really be taking the time to scan those BOL documents in and at least have them available somewhere digitally, like a Microsoft SharePoint or Google Drive or something like that. Best case scenario, you're doing something where they're searchable. So you can search for a specific PO number or a date or a BOL number or whatever it may be.
Yes, and I mean, I think you hit right on the trend too. Walmart and other retailers are focusing a lot on automation. So I feel like on the side of suppliers, there also is a need for automation as those systems grow to be smarter slowly together. Yeah, I think you hit it right on the nose there of just making sure that things are continuing to be automated and easier. So your team isn't spending, 15 minutes looking for a shipping document that may or may not exist due to storage reasons, but that's perfect. I want to get into a more technical question. Would you be able to address the SSCC 18 label requirements? And if not, that's okay. I know we have some details on it from a webinar that I'm trying to remember where it is.
Yeah.
And is there an app that can create them for free, those barcodes?
I have very surface level knowledge of that. I am familiar with it, and I think it is kind of rolled into the SWEP initiative that Walmart has launched.
Mhm.
So I know we have that information here at SuppyPike, and I think we could probably ask that particularly our OTIF team
Mhm.
for some of those. I haven't seen anything about a service or a retail link app or anything that actually allows you to create those labels. So I don't think there is on that. Unfortunately, I think that's about all I can share.
No, that's totally fine. I know we have some information for it somewhere. I'm going to call out on the wizards behind the scenes who are listening in from the supplier wiki team to possibly share the supplier. It's got a long title, supplier secondary packaging. That would be where I would look first. It is a lengthy, I think 280-page PDF document that outlines how Walmart wants everything. And I'll also take it upon myself to kind of look into these. I know we've done some research on them because they are, like you said, looped into some of those SQEP requirements. But I'm not sure either if there is a way that Walmart allows you to create those for free. But I know that in that secondary supplier packaging document, they outline a lot of their preferences and have even tagged like, hey, here's who we would recommend for building pallets. So I wonder if there's that in there as well. I'll take that upon myself to do a little bit more research, but appreciate you answering that and kind of having that discussion, because that's one I've seen a little bit more as well.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, that 280-page document, some light bedtime reading on packaging guidelines.
Yeah, if you want to fall asleep pretty quickly, that's the way to do it. Yeah. And we also have on our SQEP deep dives, phases 2 and 3, and then as well as phase 1, we have outlines of the different pages that you should go to. So go ahead and download that on our website, the SQEP phases 1 and 2 deep dives, and you can download those slide decks and actually cross-reference. We've bookmarked the pages for you that might be most helpful for that. But we'll go ahead and look at those SSCC 18 barcodes as well. All right, let's get into some more questions. Let's see, where do we want to start back? Would you be able to talk a little bit about ASNs at a high level and how those impact, the accessibility, the process, and then disputing for shipping documents?
Sure. Yeah, I can keep it fairly high level for sure and share what I do know. So ASNs are generally required by retailers, stands for Advanced Ship Notice. It is an EDI document, so transmitted through your EDI provider. Basically outlines, what they're what you shipped, when it's supposed to arrive, what DC it is. So a lot of the same information that is going to be on your other documents, like a PO or a BOL. But yeah, we at SuppyPike use that ASN, those documents and the data off of it to help us determine the validity of a claim. And we do that by, basically saying, you as the supplier in your ASN that was transmitted right before the shipment, said that you were going to ship those 30 cases. You got deducted for 5 cases because the retailer said that they only received 25. So yeah, just kind of another data point to show what was at least intended to be shipped.
I got you. That's helpful.
Yeah,
Um,
I think unfortunately, again, with EDI, really anything with EDI is kind of um, not the most human readable format. So it's kind of hard. You kind of have to translate the data up from the EDI to something meaningful. But
mm.
yeah.
Speaking of EDIs, do you have any recommendations on making those a little bit more accessible for humans? And then as well, some of the EDIs that you would earmark as being important for suppliers to have awareness of.
Yeah, I mean, so basically all of those documents that we talked about today outside of the BOL and POD are going to come across as EDI originally. So the PO, the ASN, the invoice, those are all for the most part transmitted via EDI. I know there are a handful of kind of major EDI providers, and some of the bigger ones offer like their own type of web portal where they do display that the data that is on the document in a more human readable format. So generally you're looking at like a table or something that has all of the different data points there. So I would say, yeah, you probably, see what's available with your EDI provider, see if they do offer some sort of web portal where you can view that data, not just the raw EDI data, but kind of that translated human readable data as well.
Perfect.
I've even seen a few of them have like export options. So you can export the data like in mass for all of your POs.
Mm,
And that's really nice. But yeah,
perfect.
EDI is an interesting topic for sure. It's been around for so long. It's really pretty antiquated technology, but it still works. And that is, that's the standard for retail. So
I feel like that's pretty overarching for this industry in particular. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. And EDI is one of those. So thanks for outlining that. We also have, if you are curious about, what is EDI? This is not a real one, I don't think, but like 4 or 5, 6, we have those on our supplier wiki as articles. Some of the more popular or ones that people ask about mostly. So it's another helpful tip. Here's another question. So we kind of talked about this special instructions box on the BOL, but what can the supplier do if your carrier, depending on your collector, prepaid? What can you do if those instructions are not being followed? If it's not being executed correctly, if you're having trouble getting signatures consistently, what can suppliers do?
yeah, so this kind of that section that I pointed out on the previous slide
Yeah,
was not so much special instructions, but what's really common in that section is designate if the yeah, I think it's going to be pretty hard to see here, but basically you've got one for trailer loaded, and
mm-hmm.
that is either by the driver or by the shipper. And then the more applicable one, in my opinion, would be that freight counted. So who
Mm,
verified that? You can see on this one, we've got 245 packages up kind of in that middle section.
mm-hmm.
And then this is basically, in this case, it's by shipper. So this is a really bad example, or well, it's an example of one that really doesn't prove one way or the other, because this is saying the freight was counted by the shipper, which
Mm,
is kind of, a one party type of thing, hasn't been verified, if you will. So if at all possible, you should really try and avoid that and have the driver verify, count what is actually on the shipment.
mm,
Some things that can be difficult if you're collect particularly, you don't really have a lot of control over what you can force the driver to do. And in fact, a lot of trucking companies have kind of a blanket rule. I wouldn't say a lot. Some trucking companies have, uh, a rule that they don't allow the driver to count the freight or even go inside of the warehouse. And if Walmart sends, or any retailer sends one of those companies that won't count it, there's really not much you can do. We have seen Some companies try to get around that by actually taking pictures of the freight as it's being loaded.
Mhm.
Um, Generally not going to be like a home run as far as whether a retailer will consider that or not, but it's kind of all you can do really. You don't have a relationship with that driver or with the company that they work for, so if they refuse to count and verify, you're kind of stuck.
Mm.
um, on the flip side of that, with prepaid, you do have, control over that. You can decide whether to work with a company that doesn't allow their drivers to do that or not. There are obviously tons of factors that go into a decision of whether you're going to be prepaid or collect. And I think, collect is going to work better for a lot of suppliers for a lot of reasons. But if you're getting a lot of these shipping related deductions, having control over that relationship with the transportation companies is going to be in your favor for sure.
Got it. That's super helpful.
As far
And
as, I'm sorry, I think you had was there a second part to that question?
yeah, there was a second part. And I think it kind of dives more into the details of it. So what verbiage, and I'll just read it verbatim, what verbiage works best for making freight carriers liable for carton count? So you kind of talked about it here. And I think what you're going to say is going to be about checking these differently, but are there other alternatives to make that easier depending on if you're prepaid or collect?
Yeah, I mean, so the verbiage would be those check boxes. You want the freight counted by driver, or
Mm.
generally going to be by driver. As far as, other types of verbiage, and especially this probably more relevant for prepaid suppliers. If you can get that outlined like in your contract or in your rates with that carrier, what they, black and white, what they will and will not do, and potentially you can hold them to other things as well. So not just counting the freight, but you could potentially work in some language about holding them accountable if you receive shipping related deductions, or holding them accountable if they don't deliver things by the must arrive by date.
Mm.
I think, obviously it's going to kind of depend on your negotiating power and probably the volume that you're doing with those transportation companies. But it is certainly possible, and it's probably just something you would need to work out with your account rep when you are working on rates.
Perfect. That's helpful. And I'll kind of point to another learning path on Supplier Wiki. If you are listening into the conversation today, asking questions about, well, should I be more collect versus prepaid? Should I go completely in one particular lane over another? We're actually going to do, I think it's at the end of this month, and maybe one of the wizards from Supplier Wiki can put the link in for the webinar sign up. We're going to do a supplier's guide to collect versus prepaid, and talking a little bit about, the pros and the cons and why you would choose one or the other, or leverage one lane over the other, depending on your needs, and also being able to dispute and win things, because there are obstacles for both of those.
Yeah, I can imagine. Well, that's always going to be a relevant topic, shipping to retailers, but I imagine probably even more interest, particularly with Walmart now that they've introduced some of those new charges they're passing on to collect suppliers. So
Yes, the collect pickup program is what you're referring to, and that launched 4th of July weekends. That was a fun way to celebrate being a collect supplier in the US. But essentially, now suppliers, just updating everybody on the call if you haven't heard of this, Walmart now charges suppliers fees. And I'm saying the word fees because they're not disputable, and it's not because you've done anything wrong. It's just the cost of being a collect supplier. And it's essentially a vehicle or a fuel surcharge. So charging you for the pitching in for gas money essentially. And then the second charge would be, hey, we're going to pick it up from your house. So, or from your DC, from your manufacturing. So, we're going to charge you or give you a fee for that. It's, to me, essentially like when you sign up for an Airbnb, you book an Airbnb and you're like, oh yeah, $100, it's pretty good. And then the cleaning fees and the other fee get tacked on, and suddenly your stay is like $200 or more. So we have a webinar on that. We have articles on that. I'm sure I keep calling on our behind the scenes friends who can send those links in the chat. So hopefully they can do that for us, because we've got lots of resources on all of those. And then Carter, we're going to kind of end here pretty soon and get into the Document Explorer demo. But I wanted to ask you, kind of as our parting question, what are some of the trends that you think suppliers should be thinking about in terms of shipping documents, shipping collect versus prepaid in the next couple years?
Yeah, I mean, I think, we touched on it a little bit, but any kind of automation and technology you can bring into your processes, I think is, ultimately going to be for the better. And I think if you can get ahead and start to do some of those things now or soon, I think you're going to head off a lot of these future changes. So I mean, like the collect pickup program is a great example, not particularly relevant to shipping documents, but it was a very kind of sudden change that Walmart said, we're going to introduce this new system, and they gave like very little notice. So things like that will continue to happen. Obviously, they're going to continue to make changes as they're automating their processes in their warehouses, particularly around receiving. Things are going to change, and the better prepared you are and the more data you have and more technology you have built into your processes, I think you're going to set yourself up for success and be able to react to those things a lot more quickly and more easily in the future.
No, I totally agree. Just in our research and the things we're talking about here at SupplyPike, Walmart has bought Canoe, or has invested in Canoe, which is, the self-driving vehicles, which they are hoping to apply to, the trucking industry that they have, Walmart Freight. And then, they've purchased automation and different robots and AI and technology just to help at the DCs to make things a lot less manual and more seamless. So it just kind of feeds into everything from like maximizing your business at Walmart. So, you want to be successful there. So complying to those things, while also minimizing the revenue loss that can happen when you are shipping to Walmart or a major retailer, because they will hit you with those compliance fines, whether they be on your packaging, on the documents you use, on shortages that manifest out of some of those issues that can happen. I think you hit it right on the money there. That automation is definitely a huge part of where major retailers are going.
Yeah, for sure. The compliance programs are definitely not going away, but they almost certainly will change. So
yes, and we want to keep you updated as those change, which is a perfect segue before we get into the demo that you're going to show us, Carter, of Document Explorer. I just wanted to give another shout out to our supplier wiki resources. We build relevant and they're resources that are always free for CPG suppliers. So here are a couple of our ebooks. We have articles, we have webinars like the one you're on today. And if you want something, ask and you shall receive. We're here to help suppliers with all the things that they have to manage, so you can focus on maximizing your business rather than revenue loss. And with that, these are our emails. These are real emails. If you have other questions about shipping documents or Document Explorer, or just the wonderful world of supply chain industry, we're here to help. And my name's Allie. Like I said before, thank you, Carter, for walking us through that content and answering all those questions. And if you want to find us at supplypike.com, you can look into our education arm that I've highlighted a couple of times today, or some of our solutions we have for compliance, documents, deductions, etc. So with that, let's take a tour of Document Explorer. I tried to rhyme there. It didn't work that well, but I'll stop sharing my screen. If you want to go ahead and share your screen, Carter, we will jump into our demo. And as Carter's doing that, if you have to hop off at this point, we totally understand. Here at SuppyPike, we don't want to give you guys another sales pitch, but if you are interested in our solution, Carter's got it pulled up. So I'm going to let you take it away, Carter.
Awesome. Thanks, Allie. Yeah, so this is Document Explorer. You'll see it lives kind of in SuppyPike and with the rest of our suite of products. It plays very nicely with all of our apps. So if you're on our Deductions Navigator program that completely automates the disputing process with Walmart, Target, Kroger, and Amazon, Document Explorer would be included, and this would allow us to actually go and get those documents, attach them to your claims, and basically enable the auto or bulk disputing. So really kind of the back-end tech behind Document Explorer is really fundamental to all of our products. But the front end piece is kind of what we have in place for some of those other retailers. So I mentioned full end-to-end automation for Walmart, Target, Kroger, Amazon. Document Explorer is meant to kind of work for the rest of them, right? So we do plan to build out more support for some of those other retailers. But Document Explorer, I think, can be a really powerful tool around that shipping document automation. So quickly, the way that it works, you'll see it's basically just a repository of all of your documents. At SuppyPike, we use PO number as kind of our source of basically the identifier that we use across, because it's really relevant to kind of everything you do in retail, and particularly with deduction. So everything gets organized by PO number. What's really cool is we have basically a big value add for both collect suppliers and prepaid. So if you're collect, we talked about having a stack of PDFs. If you can send those to us, whether that's through email or a Microsoft SharePoint or Dropbox or really any number of ways, what we can do is ingest those, scan them using kind of some custom what we call, or what is referred to as OCR technology. And we can figure out in that 100-page document that contains 90 different BOLs, we can split that up into just the 2 relevant pages that are relevant for this PO number. So yeah, really powerful kind of organization and then searching type capabilities for collect suppliers. And for prepaid, we actually have direct connections with close to 100 different carriers and 3PLs. So we make it really super easy to make those connections within your integrations page in SuppyPike. So you'll see we've got Costco here set up, pulling documents from a Google Drive, and that would probably be, relevant for a collect supplier. But if for Dollar General, if we ship prepaid, and we ship, let's say, I don't know, UPS, we can add that. Really simple to get up and going with just entering your username and password. So really, really simple integrations. Once we have access to those different accounts, then we can start pulling those documents based on the PO numbers. So even if you ship with 10 different transportation companies, you can connect all of them, and SuppyPike will kind of take the guesswork out of it. So you don't have to go check UPS and don't find anything. Let me check FedEx, doesn't find anything. Let me check JB Hunt. So we do all of that for you. And I think, that's what computers are really good at, doing those repetitive tasks over and over. So yeah, that's how the integrations work with the different carriers. In addition to Document Explorer, as you see it here, we also have another tool in the form of a browser extension. So we've got just kind of a mock dispute portal here just for demo purposes and show you how it works. So this is pretty similar to the CVS dispute portal. The way that our extension works is you can basically just pop it open. It realizes that you're on the CVS dispute portal, so it selects your CVS company. If you were on Dollar General or whatever, you can switch that here. It recognizes that these are all purchase orders. So it's looking for a very specific format on a specific site and says, hey, we already have files for all of these. So go ahead and, we'll make it really easy to dispute. You don't even need to go into Document Explorer to find the documents. they kind of just follow you around as you're actually doing the disputing. So making it really easy to obtain those documents kind of in the context of disputing, right? So just to harp on it again, it's all accessible here in your browser as you're actually doing the disputing. If you come across one that we don't have yet, we make it really easy to say, hey, we don't have a document for this PO number, but we can go get it if you'd like. So it immediately recognizes that you've requested a new document, goes out to all of your connected carriers or different integrations, and immediately searches for it and returns it so you can dispute, faster and without losing context.
That feels so magical just to hear you talk about that. It's so cool.
Yeah, I'm really excited about it. So this is kind of we've had Document Explorer in place since the beginning of this year. The browser extension is new, and I'm really excited to get that out there and save people some time and hopefully help them get money back to dispute more efficiently and more accurately.
That is awesome, Carter. Thank you for showing us that demo and walking us through today's content, answering all of our questions. Hopefully we didn't put you in the hot seat too much. And just wanted to call out one more thing before we jump off and say thank you, is that if you are interested in this product, we do free demos for all of our products. I believe it's 1 or 2 weeks. I'm not sure on that, but essentially, if you want to try it out for free, see how your data looks in it, especially with, our Document Explorer, if you want to pull documents and see how those are looking in terms of just how that works with your workflow, or for OTIF Radar or DN or Deductions Navigator, if you're not having any deductions or any storage issues or accessibility issues with your shipping documents, great. But we'd love you to try out that product and see if it's something that is helpful for you. And with that, again, thank you, Carter. Thank you for everybody on the call, and enjoy the rest of your Tuesday. Take care.
Thanks, Allie.
Bye. Thank you.